Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad here with Doug.
I
So this is something we've never done before, which apparently we're going to start doing now. Doug wants to talk about movies or anime or something. So
do.
uh, Evangelion had new movies?
Had a new movie come
Movie?
out. Had a new movie come
Only
out.
one?
Yes, only
Oh, you're
one.
talking to me about four of them.
I am talking about four of them. Yeah, sorry. I know. I know. We don't. This is. I feel like this might cross a boundary with us. We only talk about games. We don't talk about movies. It's not something we want to talk about. But I watched 5, 6 hours maybe straight of Evangelion. I just need to talk about it. I'm sorry. It's a lot. It's a lot. So Evangelion came out with this new.
Basically, what I'm getting right now, and we were talking about, well, I played through Skyward Sword, so we're talking about that, and Doug's like, well, I want to talk about Evangelion, and you've texted me, I think, probably like 2 dozen times in the last like 3 days about this, and I just
Yeah.
go, okay.
You can just
But
bully
anyway,
Brad into recording whatever we want. Whatever.
anyway,
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Evangelion for a second. So Evangelion was this TV show that came out, I think, in 1995. Um, it is, it's an interesting show because the plot, like the level, like plot of like who does what and why, feels far less important than just the mood that it kind of it brings. Um, it's a very loosely about a kid fighting robots, and that was a kid who is in a mecha suit fighting other people in mecha suits, and that was my
that's
like,
all I
yeah, that was
that's
my
all I knew
impression of
about
it.
this. I just remember there being big robot, and I was like, oh, I think that's a Gundam thing.
And that's what I thought it was for a long time. And then I just kept hearing about it, and it's just like, oh, it's the most popular anime ever. And I just thought, like, okay, it's going to be a normal anime about these kids going to robots and fighting bad guys, and everybody wins at the end, sort of thing. It is the exact opposite of that. Like, I think maybe the only thing I could possibly compare it to would be Kingdom Hearts with like depression. But Kingdom Hearts just kind of just go like off the wall. Like when you're like trying to think
Yeah,
about the plot of like Kingdom Hearts, it's just like this is getting absolutely insane. That's what Evangelion is. It is like barely about kids and robots fighting monsters. There's a lot of this weird Judeo-Christian stuff in it, and in the end, I'm gonna get into spoilers just so heads up everybody. In the end of the show, the world
wait,
kind
is
of
this for the brand new thing that just came out? You're
everything
spoiling?
for everything. I just need to talk about Evangelion. I don't care if you can just turn off now. It doesn't matter. I need to talk about this. I just need to talk about it. So in the original show ending, it ends with the world essentially ending. And this kid who's been depressed the entire show, he's like, actually, I realize now that like being with people is the most important. And the end of the show is insane. There's like rumors they kind of run out of budget, so it's like barely in color. It's just like sketches of people and like just random photographs of it's like actual locations. And like this kid who's like it's like a monologue and basically whatever. It's kind of an interesting ending to a show you think it's just about anime, but it's actually about a lot of other stuff. And so what had happened was he had gotten a lot of hate for that, like a lot of hate for that ending in the original. And so he created this movie called End of Evangelion, which is essentially kind of like a pseudo sequel to the show. And it is the most hate filled movie I've ever seen. It's basically like he kills all the characters. The world ends really horribly. All of the characters you've known and loved have died really horrible ways. And it ends on this really, really strange note. And during the movie, he's actually like putting up death threats that he got for the original ending. Of like, it's like, oh, we hate you, we want to kill you, and all this other stuff. And basically, that whole movie, which I think came out like 2000, was just like this really hateful, hateful movie that like when I was done with it, I was just like, I felt really just weird and bad. And,
Always
like,
what you want after a movie.
well, it was funny because I was like, I just wasn't expecting that of a franchise that was like supposed to be one of the number one anime franchises on the planet. You're just like not, you're just expecting it to be Dragon Ball Z. I don't know. I just like Dragon Ball Z, pretty normal stuff, and it was
I
just
love Dragon Ball Z. That's my one anime point of reference.
exactly. But it's Dragon Ball Z is kind of silly, but it's like it's people with superpowers fighting each other. Not really much beyond that. Let's just, I'll
Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's stupid fun. I love it.
Yeah, and then Evangelion was just not that. It's like very metaphysical, a lot about depression and stuff. So anyway, so this guy decides to remake these movies and retell them. And this may be interest to you, but Final Fantasy VII Remake learned a lot from Evangelion and kind of the retelling of the same way. So what he decided to do is he's like, okay, I'm going to make this new movie series that's going to retell the events of the show. So your first movie, I think it's called like 1.11.
It is Kingdom
It
Hearts.
is Kingdom Hearts. It is 100% Kingdom Hearts. It's like, oh gosh, I wish I could look up the things, but it's like, I think it's called the Evangelion 1.1, you are not alone, and then the not is in parentheses, and then I think like 2.2 is called like you cannot proceed. But anyway, so like the first movie is kind of interesting, but it's like a basic retelling of the first movie, but they keep putting in like these like little, kind of like Final Fantasy VII Remake, these things that like don't make sense. Like, wait a second, that didn't happen in the show. That what's going on here?
Yep.
And then the rest of the show, then like this the second movie is essentially splitting off from that new alternate timeline, and then it ends. The second movie ends with a different ending than the show. The world still ends, but it ends in a very, very different way than what happened in the original show. It's like, okay, well, what's going on now? It's kind of like, okay, now all bets are off. And the third movie then takes place 15 years later. So all the characters are now aged up who have supposed to have died as far as like the show is concerned, where like everybody died. It's like, so the apocalypse didn't happen, but it kind of does. And then the fourth movie kind of concludes that storyline. But the thing that I just thought was really, really interesting, but I'm not going to go like too much into detail. But the thing I just thought that was really cool about this new series is that it's a much more optimistic view of depression and mental illness and that sort of thing. Because so like the first one, it's the guy when he made the first show was like being in the depths of depression, and it's like pretty horrible and it sucks, and like how he perceives people talking to him and that sort of thing. And then End of Evangelion is kind of this like really hateful sort of interpretation of him dealing with that and people not liking that about the show.
Yep.
And then this one, it's more reinterpretation of like, let's take some of those events and characters and sort of those ideas, but more optimistically coming out of depression as opposed to getting deeper into it. So it's this cool sort of response, I think, to the first show, where instead of getting darker and darker and darker, it's actually getting more and more hopeful and optimistic by the end.
So you almost get like the binary idea of like, these are the two different paths you could take. You could take the original way, which goes dark. You could take the new way, which goes in a more hopeful direction. You can kind of see both. And again, I have no concept of this. So you can essentially see like, okay, one choice takes you to a dark path, one choice takes you to a hopeful path. Is that kind of what you're pointing out?
Yes, exactly. And it's fun because in the final movie, the assumption is that you've seen the show and all that stuff. There's this interesting dichotomy stuff that they play with about these two spears that are part of the plot that's way too hard to explain. But one is hope and one is despair. And it's these two sort of intertwining ideas of like, of the first show was like, life is meaningless. What's the point of going on? And this one is like, yes, life is meaningless, but you live until you can't any longer, sort of thing. Like just like push through, just living the life that's the joy of it, sort of thing. That's the hope of it, instead of this sort of despair. And it's just really cool because I think the whole thing took like 26 years. So like what's 1995 to 2021? Is that like 26?
That's 26.
Yeah, 26 years. So you're just seeing this creator who made this really, really popular show essentially just make a commentary on it. And it felt a lot like Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's like, the things I liked about Final Fantasy VII Remake is, and not trying not to get too spoilery, but it's clearly there's commentary built into how of the people making the game and the fandoms and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's just seeing that, but to like sort of the nth degree of where it's like, the guy is like looking at his work and saying, it's like, actually, I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong when I said those things. And here's what I actually believe now. It feels more adult. And it's funny because when I'm seeing comments online, there's a lot of people who really like it because it ends a lot more hopeful. But then there's people who are fans of the series saying it's like, well, this isn't as depressing as I normally like it. And it's just cool sort of, but to me, it seems more adult. It's a lot more about acceptance of accepting the idea that life is meaningless, accepting that you have depression, and accepting that that you feel like shit about yourself and you feel like that the world is ending, and you know, but you know, it's okay to just, once you accept that, you can move on to the next steps. And it's cool seeing these characters not fall into despair but fall into hope, sort of thing. And the thing I do really like about it is like the plot. I'm kind of like not really talking about the plot because the plot is really fucking confusing. Like I don't even think I can tell you the plot, but it does these sort of, I'm trying to think of like what's something comparable. It's kind of like watching art house films where the plot doesn't matter, but just like the emotions that it's invoking.
Yes, the feeling of the characters and seeing how they connect with each other. Yeah.
And sometimes Kingdom Hearts, I feel like, does a lot of convoluted plot just to get you like a really kind of exciting moment. It's like there's a needless plot just to get you to this point where this really cool moment happens. And that's a lot what happens in Evangelion, because like they really, really make you feel hopeless in some scenes. Like I would say like this is far more than any other movie I've seen where like the stakes feel like they're just never going to make it out kind of thing. And a lot of characters don't. And it's, I would say even like with a hopeful ending, I'm putting that in quotation marks because a lot of bad things happen to get to that point. But it was just like a very cool thing. And just watching all the movies in a row, because even the movies, I think they started in 2002. So that the movie series itself was
so that's like 19 years worth of.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, so you're seeing, but so like when I watch them back to back to back, you can see like his theory on these things like changing.
That's cool.
And the direction and the movies feel very, very different. Like I think the second one's like pretty weak, and then the third one's like really cool, and the fourth one's like amazing. But it's just because these different ideas are coming in, and like it didn't feel like, I guess like Rise of Skywalker is probably not a bad example, but it's like when you watch Rise of Skywalker, it's not like. It's like the people didn't talk to each other, like getting to that, like maybe Rise of Skywalker was not the original ending that people had thought was like when
that J.J. Abrams wanted in his stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big tangent.
Yes, I don't want to get too much into it, but it does kind of feel like that with the first movie, that the fourth movie is maybe not how they thought it would end.
Because you're going 19 years later, and
because you're going 19 years later, but it feels like so satisfying to it. And it's just a fun, weird art housey movie. And I think I appreciate that, like how effing weird it is for how popular it is. It's like if DBZ was just really, really strange. I mean, it's stranger than it is, but it was just cool. And I just want to talk about Evangelion. Okay, I'm done.
And insert ending here. We are Workforce Gaming. You can subscribe to us wherever you're listening and follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming, and we will see you later.
Bye.